Look what it says. It says, "Now concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." When it says, "Let not Satan tempt you," you know how Satan tempts, don't you? Through the eyes, through the flesh. That's how Satan tempts, through the flesh. Because Satan has been destroyed, so he's not going to appear now to tempt you. You tempt yourself through your own lusts. It says, verse 6, "But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment." In other words, the apostle recommends certain things. It says, "For I wish that all men were even as I myself. But each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that." Listen, he wishes all men were like him. The race wouldn't have multiplied. Look at what he says, "But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am." Imagine that. Paul didn't want them to marry. Let widows remain widows and let unmarried people remain unmarried. Well, no, he is speaking. You have to understand him, because he himself later says, marriage is honorable in all respects. So you have to understand the context. And Paul is talking to a worldly church, the Corinthians. They did everything wrong. They observed Easter wrong. He wrote to them like they were family, not like they were just spiritual. So he had to discuss topics even about marriage. He had to dive into it, because they had tremendous disorders in the congregations. And then over there too, there were temples dedicated to practicing sex, religions in the temples that practiced those kinds of immoralities. It says, verse 9, "But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion." So you have to have a gift. This is where the Catholics came from, because they learned from Paul. From there, Peter started forbidding those individuals employed in the Catholic Church from getting married, utilizing these very lessons that the Apostle Paul was imparting. But Paul says if he has the gift, because otherwise, look what is happening. Those poor boys get into Catholicism and they become effeminate, and then they start having, look at all the lawsuits the Catholic Church currently has because of that. That the priest raped 11 boys during the 10 years he was there, and why? Because they don't have the gift of self-control. If you have that gift, forget it. Nothing happens to you. You have it. Say the gift. A gift is something God enables you to possess, just as Paul did. Paul said, "I do not. I remained alone." But if you don't have the gift, don't do it, because you'll get yourself into trouble. That is why Paul says in Timothy, in the latter times there will come religions that prohibit marriage. And imposing bans is exactly what the Catholic Church does. It forbids marriage and puts men and women in those roles, and that's why such tremendous problems arise later on.